Well, everybody loves Dr. Harriet Fraad. She's the host of Capitalism Hits. What? Are you there?
I'm back. Here I am.
There you are. Host of Capitalism Hits Home, as well as It's Not Just in Your Head, and Wednesdays at 2:30 on WBAI. Welcome, Dr. Fraad, and it's good to see you. So, Tommy Tuberville, he's a senator.
I remember him because he said that he was fighting against socialism, just like his father fought against the socialists in Germany during World War II. Very well informed.
Yes. I was going to say that today or yesterday, he said Putin is an example. To those of you who are seeing what's happening in Ukraine, I hope you'll think twice about socialism and how dangerous socialists like Vladimir Putin are. And I thought, I know Republicans are stupid. They are. They are stupid. And I don't have a big enough platform that I have to worry about being tolerant of idiots.
No.
Is it possible that there are people who are that ignorant, who think that Putin is a socialist?
Sure. First of all, they want to create a Cold War so badly they make it up. And they just didn't catch on way back in 1989 when the Soviet Union fell apart. And they believe the kind of propaganda they spew. That's what's blown my mind. The propaganda and the fact that we don't know. I'm not saying that I hold any brief for Putin, who's a sexist pig, and also an authoritarian. However, we have provoked that war. You know, when the Soviet Union fell apart, we made a promise with Russia that we would not recruit into NATO any of the socialist bloc countries. Since then...
Well, I have to correct everybody here because I talked about this at the beginning of the show and everybody keeps bringing that up. I don't mean to be rude, but...
No, do it. If I'm wrong, correct me.
Yeah. In 1990, at the beginning of 1990, Germany was reunifying, and Baker, the Secretary of State under George Herbert Walker Bush, was trying to facilitate their reunification. So he met with Gorbachev, the Soviet Union was still extant. There was no indication yet that the Soviet Union was about to fall in 1990. And Baker, the Secretary of State under George Herbert Walker Bush, said, if you allow Germany to reunify peacefully, we will not try to expand into Eastern Europe. When he made that promise, the Warsaw Pact was still intact, as was the Soviet Union. So expanding NATO was out of the question. It took almost 2 years after that promise was made for the Soviet Union to be dissolved. So there was no promise to Russia that we weren't going to expand NATO. Now, I do understand why Putin doesn't want NATO expanding, but there was no agreement not to expand NATO.
Well, I understood there was also the agreement in Hungary that we wouldn't expand NATO into the countries surrounding Russia, and in 2014, the Minsk agreement, and we have gone against those agreements, and we have bases surrounding the Soviet Union. What was the Soviet Union and actually Russia in what all those former countries. And what I can't help thinking about was when Cuba was going to have a whole armament center for the Soviet Union, 90 miles from home. And JFK risked nuclear war in order to stop that. That's 90 miles from home. Ukraine is on the Soviet border. Also, the Russians have two main things to sell, gas and oil to Europe. 2 of the pipelines run through the Ukraine. So the fact that the Ukraine would be friendly to Russia is important. Also, we should understand that the former ruler of the Ukraine was pro-Russian, and he was deposed with a lot of help from the American government. In fact, the WikiLeaks showed a email, a communication from Victoria, I think it's Newfield, I can't remember her last name. What?
Newland.
Newland, that Victoria Newland, that said, should we put in the clown? She was talking about the comic who's now in, Zelensky, as they got rid of the pro-Soviet. So that the Americans then installed an anti-Russian government. And 2 of their main pipelines go through the Ukraine. So that's very important to them, and it's all on their border. So we have bases utterly surrounding them, which is quite provocative, you know. My God, I looked it up. Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia, who reconfigured their military to be compatible with NATO. What are we doing? Now, Obama stalled that process of arming those places. Trump reversed it, and so has Biden, an old cold warrior, that Biden. And so what are we doing? We're cutting off their lifeblood. I'm not saying that this was the brilliant thing to do. I don't know what his other alternatives are, although they had been trying to negotiate for about a half a year, but whatever. I think we ignore that. And also that 2 of the sections of the Ukraine are Russian, are affiliated with the Russians, and there was pro-Russian feeling. Also that the Nazis were very active in the Ukraine, which went against the revolution, for the Russian Revolution. They were in the White Army, not the Red Army, and that there are brigades that they don't photograph that are flying swastikas. So there's a mixed bag here in the Ukraine, and they were inviting NATO and nukes. And, you know, Russia is being provoked. Now, I can understand why the war in Afghanistan, which we knew we were going to lose after 2 years, but continued to fund to 2.3 billion and help those armaments companies going. Well, that's gone. They need another war or a Cold War to keep the armaments companies making money.
Right.
And so, okay, so they are going to provoke it. But I do think that although I hold no brief for Putin and a big brief for Pussy Riot against Putin, I do think that you were provoking this confrontation with a nuclear-armed Russia, and that's outrageous. I mean, Cuba was 90 miles from home. Ukraine is home. You cross the bridge. And I can see why Russia has been provoked. Now, I don't know why they had to take this avenue, and also the hypocrisy of hearing that I heard Biden trying to act presidential because he's failing in everything, in inflation and in getting his promises made, saying, we don't tolerate bullies. Well, what were you in Iraq when 4 million people at least were killed? Or in Afghanistan? What were you there? What were you in Grenada? What were you in Vietnam? Hold on, bully. So that this propaganda tidal wave is appalling. And we're not told the other side of the story, that we've been choking Russia. And its life's blood is its oil and natural gas. And if you imperil that, then what are you doing? And I think what they're doing is stimulating a war environment, which saves Biden to help him look presidential since he's failed in every other aspect. It's also a boon to Scholz in Germany, who got in with a tiny percentage of the votes and was originally against this invasion and said they wouldn't help, but now is for it because I think he's been promised the rearmament of Germany, that the US won't stay in the way. And then the bourgeoisie in Germany, who will make money off these arms, will love him and he'll have better tenure. Macron in France, who was trying to make peace and be presidential, is equally unpopular. So you have these leaders becoming presidential and popular by boosting their war general credentials here in a way that's shameful. So I've been overcome by this, and so overcome that I had to do some research and figure out why, what is going on here, and why Russia would do this. And now I do understand. I don't say that it was his only alternative. I really don't know. But we don't have anyone on our border. It would be if the Russians were having a base in Puerto Rico, okay, as they tried in Cuba, and that was 90 miles away, not on the border, or in Mexico, right on the border of California, and where our essential economy would be terribly affected if they could be provoked to turn it off. So, except for the munitions industry, which has done wonderfully with war and doesn't have one at the moment, an active one to whip people up for, that's the only rationale I can see for this provocation, which could endanger the world. It's right. It captured me because it's so bizarre.
Right. It's interesting. Human beings don't think they stink. Other people think other humans stink. So when you hear about America getting closer to the border of Russia because I'm an American, I go, well, so what's wrong with that? What's wrong with America being in Afghanistan or encouraging NATO to spread? Why should Russia fear the United States? Why should Putin fear the United States? He views the fall of the Soviet Union as a catastrophe, the same way a lot of American Jews are unable to look at the foundation of Israel as a catastrophe for the Palestinians. That's what they call it, a catastrophe. And American Jews go, why do you think that's a catastrophe? Why don't you see it the way we do? I think Americans celebrated the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Understand why Putin views this as the worst thing that happened in his life. His pride is at stake, and that he wants to reunify at least the Slavic nations like Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. He sees Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia as parts of the whole. I don't understand that. And so...
Well, he just lost America when Trump wasn't reelected, so he's feeling badly.
So why were we poking at Russia? Why were we interfering in Ukraine?
I think a question of what Ilhan Omar said to her, for which she was condemned. It's all about the Benjamins. I really do think it's about the arms industry needing another war, needing another Cold War in order to keep going. Because part of what rescued us from the Depression was arming ourselves for World War II, and we've never stopped arming ourselves. And people are still involved with Russia as if it weren't a monstrous capitalist country. They think of it as communist Russia. No, it isn't. It never was. But I mean, at the beginning, it had hopes. But really, what is this? I think it's because the drumbeat is necessary. There was an article about it that if you invested $10,000 at the beginning of the Afghanistan war, it would be worth $100,000 now, 20 years later. They made big money, and the defense contractors, which are the richest and most influential and also the only area where America still has world hegemony. They needed to be fed. And if the whole planet is destroyed because of it, hey, they're making money. I think that's what it's about.
It's hard to wrap your head around that kind of evil, but
Yeah,
it exists.
it
You know,
does.
everyone I know, every woman I know, I'm not trying to, this is women, all the women in my life watch crime documentaries, criminal documentaries about true crime. The whole country is fascinated by true crime and evil, but we can't wrap our heads around how evil the people at the very top are.
Exactly. And I think that's why we're fascinated. I think it's a displacement. They know they're in a criminal empire, but they don't want to face it. So they like to see crime movies. They know that their situation is horrible and they don't want to admit it. So they like horror movies. It's classic psychological displacement.
Okay, so you're a psychotherapist. I am conditioned to see war in Ukraine and get terrified. And I'm conditioned to see Putin as the next bogeyman, the next Hitler, the next Saddam Hussein. The dominoes. First it's Ukraine, then it's Moldova, then it's America. Is there any legitimacy to where does he? The question, where does he stop? You have to stop him here, otherwise he'll.
Well, we're the only ones doing this. I mean, let's face it. Russia has been invaded twice, and from European powers. We have never been invaded by Russia. There are bases already all around Russia. There is no base around no Soviet base around the United States. If all of Mexico were lined with Soviet bases right at California's border, we'd have a right to feel that way. But it's only going one way because our economy depends on the sale of armaments. Theirs doesn't. It depends on the sale of natural gas and oil. And those pipelines go right through, 2 out of the 3 pipelines go through the Ukraine. And so their economic well-being is threatened. And
Right.
so, and it's not reciprocal. They're not, next step they'll get us. No, they're across the world and they've never gone any closer. The Russians didn't go that way.
It's Schultz, the socialist or the left-leaning new leader of Germany, agreed to spend 2% of Germany's GDP. He said maybe even more on weapons, which is what you have. In order to be a member of NATO, you have to spend at the very least 2% of your GDP. Germany wasn't doing that. Now they are. Boy, that sure makes up the gap for the military-industrial complex. No war in Afghanistan, 2% of Germany's GDP being spent on weapons.
Yeah, but we'll see whether France allows that and whether the rearmament of Germany doesn't upset other countries in Europe, since we've done that twice and seen the results of arming Germany. I think they're all doing it for personal political gain, and the United States needs a war. By the way, someone in the chat said that I say Soviet and AUSSR instead of Russia. That's true. It's just habit. Ever since 1989, 1990, it's Russia.
Right. There are habits. It's hard to kick habits like America invading countries with brown people. We can't seem to stop doing that.
Ukrainians are white, and so we're on.
Well, how do you see this shaking out? Do you think do you think Ukraine is going to be leveled like Syria?
I don't know, or like we did to Iraq, or I don't know. I don't know if it will. Zelensky was put in there by the Americans. And Russia has many admirers in the Ukraine, in those two breakaway states that want to speak Russian and identify as Russian, and so do other elements of the Ukraine. I don't know how this will shake out, but I know that it's outrageous, immoral brinkmanship for money. That's what I know.
Right.
Because I'm sorry.
The Western media seems to be reporting that Ukraine is unified in its fight against Putin. That the stories that I'm reading is that they don't want to be aligned with Russia, that they want to be aligned with the EU and NATO, and that the Ukrainian people want independence. Is that true?
I think many of them want independence, and they certainly don't want to be leveled. And if they know that whatever their grand pronouncements, they're not going to put American or European soldiers in the Ukraine. You know, they fight to the death of the last Ukrainian. That's the rallying cry. And we will give you the guns, or sell you the guns rather. But they, you know, I think that they should not have agreed to NATO. There have been, once the Soviet Union fell and it was only Russia, there was no need for NATO anymore. It was just drummed up for a Cold War economy. What was the need? Putin's a capitalist. It's all about money. And it's immoral to an outrageous degree. And that's what gets to me.
Yeah. It was supposed to be the time when this country was focusing on Build Back Better. People have questioned my statistic. I repeat over and over again that 140 million Americans live at or below the poverty line. And people write to me, go, that's not true. And I go, yes, it is.
It is. They're Alice. They're assets limited, income constrained, but employed. They don't have savings. 60% of the country doesn't have $400 in case of a dire emergency. So what are we talking about? You know, it's like you said a little earlier. It's not like you can boast about your standard of living. We're circling the bowl for the mass of Americans, not just people of color or anything else.
That was the argument when in the 80s, when Reagan spent Russia, they say, into the dust heap of history. A lot of Americans said, why are we spending all this money on the Star Wars defense initiative? It's never going to work. And the argument was, you like your way of life, don't you? And I used to say back then, no, I don't.
Right.
Now I really don't like it. Now I look around, I'm homeless people.
Oh my God.
No health care. And we're again, I don't see us sending troops to Ukraine.
No, we're not going to send troops, just money and weapons that cost a lot. And doing big propaganda so that Biden can stand before the world and say, America protects the world from bullies. America is the biggest bully of all. And in a UN study, most people said they're most afraid of the Americans.
But how can that be? We're America.
Right.
We're good people.
Well, there are a lot of good people in the United States, but there are a lot of good politicized people. And I must say, I don't see all that many Americans that are all that excited about Ukraine either.
Right.
They're excited about the inflation that's wiping them out. I have a client who his union won 3.72% raise. Well, the inflation's going to go up to about 8. So congratulations, you know.
We never hear about military spending causing inflation, only paying kids $300 a month. That causes inflation, but building weapon systems, that doesn't, no inflationary pressure there. Dr. Harriet Fraad is the host of Capitalism Hits Home, and it's not just in your head. How do people contact you?
Either at my website, harrietfraad.com. Remember, that's HA2RSIE1T or at hfraad@gmail.com. And I won't be in for the next 2 Mondays because I'm going away, and I'll come back so enthusiastic. I've let you know a bunch, but I'll let you know a bunch more.
Are you going to San Francisco? Where are you going?
Yes, San Francisco. I wrote a note to you and to Hannah. Yeah, and I will miss being on the show. It's one of the only
We will
things
miss you. We
I
love
really,
you.
really will miss. I love being here.
Well, we love having you. You've changed you've changed our lives. Enjoy San Francisco.
It's always autumn. I love autumn in San Francisco. Yeah.
I spent so much time in San Francisco. It's too many. It's Pelosi country. So
ouch. Don't ruin it for me.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harriet Fraad. We'll see you.